Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. It is September and we are back with some new titles that we have been reading. As we share them with you, if you want to get your hands on any of these books, there are several ways to go about doing that. Probably the simplest is to simply call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and talk to the staff there and let them know what you're looking for. You can also go online to our catalog and request any of the physical versions of the titles that are available. And we also have 2 apps that you can request items through if it's listed next to the title when you see it that it's available there. So you can check out Libby, which provides downloadable audiobooks and ebooks, and you can check out Hoopla, which provides downloadable audiobooks and ebooks as well as movies, music, and graphic novels. And the bonus with Hoopla is that if it's on Hoopla and it has a lightning bolt next to it, and almost everything there does, that means that there's never a wait and multiple people can have the same item checked out at the same time. I am Jennifer Graneski, and I am the community librarian at the, sorry, I am just dealing with some tech issues today. We're going to deal with that later. I am the community librarian in the Dundee area. And our question to kick us off today is September is library card sign-up month. And so our question is, when and where did you receive your first library card? And my first library card came through the Flint Public Library System in Flint, Michigan. And it was right in downtown Flint on their arts campus near the Sloan Museum. And there's a theater there. And I'm trying to think what else. The planetarium, that was the other thing. And they're all right in next to each other. And I don't remember a lot about getting the card that day, but I remember the card was a brown piece of paper and I got signed my name on it, all pretty. And I don't know what they put it through, but it was through some sort of heavy lamination machine. So the laminate was all the way around the edges. And I had that card for a long time. I went back to try and use it when I was in college and they all kind of looked at me like, we have new cards now. We can get you a new one. So that was my first library card. Flint Public Library System had a fabulous children's section. Checked out lots and lots of books there. And I don't know if it was them or my parents who put the 20 book limit on me, but I was allowed to check out 20 books at a time, and that was it. So, all right. Also with us this week is Jessica Otto, who is our head of collections here at the Monroe County Library System. And what do you remember about your first library card, Jessica?
I had to think back. I'm fairly certain that my first library card was actually a school library card through the Manor Elementary School here in Monroe. I moved to Monroe and then started attending Manor like the middle of my 3rd grade year. And I feel like that's right when I was starting to get into like reading for fun. So I do remember getting a library card there and being very excited. So I could read a lot of R.L. Stine and Bruce Coville were my favorites at the time. So yep, at Manor Elementary. Go Bobcats.
Nice. Thank you, Jessica. Also with us is Mandy Draganic. And where did you get your first library card, Mandy?
I got my first one, and thank you for saying where in that one, because I really don't remember one, only just early 80s. But it was the Jackson District Library. It was the Summit branch. I remember nothing about the card itself, other than I lost it enough times that they charged me to replace it, right? And that was just really like the foreshadowing of what was going to happen with all of my driver's licenses throughout my adult life, but that's okay. I do remember that it was a little over a mile from my house, but my parents let me ride my bike there. And so I would come home with my backpack or a grocery bag full of books on my bike. And I spent a lot of time there.
Nice. Thank you, Mandy. And also with us is Adrienne Childress, who is a reference librarian at our Bedford branch. And what do you remember about your first library card, Adrienne?
I got my first library card at 14 through the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library System. Before that, I was on my parents' cards everywhere we went. And I got the card, and I lost the card. and I had memorized the number, and so I still use that card to this day. Not to age myself out here, but it's been 23 years. I haven't had a card, and I still just type in the same number.
That is impressive. I will say I do have my Monroe County number memorized because I put it in so much. Back in the day, I did not have my Flint Public Library card memorized. I couldn't even tell you how many digits were in the barcode. So, all right. Thank you, Adrian. And now we're going to start sharing what we've been reading and enjoying. And I'm going to ask Jessica to kick us off.
So my first title, it's somewhat of a departure read for me. It is Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood by Rebecca Wells. This book was originally published in 1996. So I had been aware of the book's existence pretty much since I started working for the library 20-some years ago, although it never really struck me as something I want to read. I was always like, well, what is a Yaya and why do I need to read about this? And then, however, at the start of the pandemic, I had the opportunity to watch the movie that is based on the book, and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, well, now I know what a Yaya is and why I need to read about it. So the book went on my amazingly long reading list, and I just got around to reading it in this last month. So the story is centered around a mother, Vivi Abbott Walker, and her oldest daughter, Sita Lee Walker, who goes by Sita. So now Vivi and Sita have not always had the best of relationships, but now their relationship is about to face its worst moment yet. It's early 1993, and Sita is a theater director in New York City. And she is interviewed by the New York Times after the massive success of her latest theater production. And Vivi, who still resides in her home state of Louisiana, she gets a hold of the article to read the interview, and she is enraged when she discovers that some very negative things were printed about her in the New York Times article. So Vivi basically cuts off all communication with her daughter, and when she does eventually start answering her calls, it's only to tell Sita that she's done with her, she's divorcing her, and she is cutting her out of her will. So Sita, she's quite shaken up by all this because she admits, mentioning to the interviewer, that she didn't always have the happiest of childhoods. She is insistent that she never said the specific horrible things that were printed in the article. But since Vivi won't really answer any of her calls, Sita takes to writing her mother letters, at first to try to apologize and ask for forgiveness. And then in subsequent letters, she asks for her mother's advice about a new play she is directing, which is about female friendship. Sita considers her mother an expert on female friendship because she has been a member of a lifelong group of friends with 3 other women, Caro, Nisi, and Teensy, who are collectively known as the Yayas. So Sita also informs Vivi in a letter that because she has decided to postpone her upcoming wedding to her fiance Connor, because the situation with her mother has made her question her ability to love others and to know how to love. Now, although Vivi is very angry with her daughter, she is not having any of this wedding postponement nonsense. So Vivi convenes a meeting of the Yayas to tell them about this wedding news and also to discuss Sita's request for guidance pertaining to female friendship. The Yayas agree to send Sita, who is now in Seattle preparing for her new play, a scrapbook that they refer to as The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. This scrapbook is filled with endless photographs and mementos and trinkets that chronicle the lives of the Yayas going back to the start of their friendship in the 1930s. So their hope is that by looking through the scrapbook, that it will help Sita not only prepare for her new theater production, but will also help her discover some truths about her mother and specifically some things that her mother went through prior to Sida's birth. And they hope that this will help Sida better understand the context of why certain things happened during her childhood that resulted or ultimately resulted in this strained relationship with Vivi. And they hope that it will ultimately help Sida to come to terms with these events and repair the broken relationship that she has with her mother and now with her fiance to some extent, with her postponing their wedding. So for much of the remainder of the book, we travel back and forth in time from Sida reading through this scrapbook in the present day to flashbacks to different points in the lives of the Yayas, both good and bad, until these timelines converge and we find out what will become of Sida's relationship with her mother and her fiance as well. So I really enjoyed this back and forth between the timelines as it allowed for frequent changes in perspective and points of view and narration, which I felt really helped to energize the plot and keep the story fresh. So Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood is truly one of the most captivating books I have read, not just this year, but of all time. This book put my heart in a vice grip from the very first sentence, and it held it there for all 356 pages. I didn't feel like I was so much reading the story of the Yayas as I was experiencing their lives right along with them. And I was devastated when the book was over, simply because I just wanted to keep on living in that world for a little bit longer. So one of my favorite things about this book is that it opens a conversation about the importance of mental health awareness. About mental health awareness, knowing our limits, and knowing when to seek professional help. And historically, there has been a lot of stigma and discrimination around mental illness and seeking treatment for it, in which there is absolutely no reason for. Mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, and no one should feel bad or less than for seeking treatment. And it's, in my opinion, it's no different than seeking treatment for any other ailment like asthma or a heart condition. And so I think that the books like this that are willing to delve into these topics, they really help, of the topics of mental illness and the treatment of it, that it can really help us to normalize the conversations around mental health awareness and to help people feel safe to share their mental health concerns. So although I enjoyed the book very much, I just, as a caveat, I wanted to mention that in addition to all the wonderful things in this book, there are some parts that were uncomfortable for me to read. These were parts that dealt with topics like racism and segregation, and there are also parts that were difficult for me to read as the mother of young children. Now, for me, this is for me, I firmly believe that the books that are uncomfortable for me to read are the absolute most important books for me to read, because ultimately I read to learn and to understand. And if I just try to avoid things that make me uncomfortable or that are difficult for me to read about, I am really denying myself the chance to understand those things and denying myself the chance to grow outside of my comfort zone. So with reading, as in all parts in life, it is essential to get outside that comfort zone, even if it means we have to face some of the more painful parts of life and history, because even though they are painful, they're still parts, they're there, and just need to find a way to reconcile ourselves with those sometimes. So overall, this is an amazing book that deserves to be widely read. And as I mentioned, there is a wonderful movie version, which you also can get from the library. In addition to the book, Sida is played in the film by Sandra Bullock, and Vivi is played by Ellen Burstyn. And I'm really glad that I had a chance to watch the film. Otherwise, if I hadn't, I might never have picked up the book, and that would have been so sad. So I highly recommend this for fans of books on female friendship, of mother-daughter relationships, or just family relationships in general. It's the kind of book that will make you laugh and cry while laughing, and it'll just give you all the feels.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica.
So now onto something completely different. So each year on September 17th, Americans celebrate Constitution Day to commemorate the signing of the Constitution on September 17th, 1787. I think it's American citizens to know about our democracy's central document, if you will. But for our younger citizens who are trying to learn more about the Constitution, it can be kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of information to take in. So fortunately, thanks to authors David and Stephanie Miles and illustrator Albert Pinella, we now have a fun and easy way to learn about the Constitution with their 2019 book, The Interactive Constitution. The Interactive Constitution was named a 2021 Notable Social Studies Trade Book. It was also a finalist for the IBPA Benjamin Franklin Awards Bill Fisher Award for Best New Book. This fun and interactive books comes with flaps and wheels and color-changing words. But wait, there's more. There is even a special vocabulary decoder to help kids learn about types of government, checks and balances, the Bill of Rights, the amendment process, and so much more. The book opens with a section to explain why we needed the Constitution. Now, I happen to have a copy here. I don't know if you can see this because I have like my little Bayou background thing going on. But the first section, why do we need the Constitution? Well, it even has this fun pull-out mini history of the Revolutionary War. And then the next section deals with the creation of the Constitution. And it has this, let me see here. It has, wait for it, a fun circle spinny thing that explains the balance of power within the U.S. government. The next few sections are devoted to the different branches of the government that we have, such as the legislative branch, with a really fun, let me see here, pull-out flap of the U.S. Capitol building. And then we go on to the executive branch with flaps that contain pictures of all of the presidents up to 2019. And if you lift the flap on each president, there is a quote from each of the presidents underneath the flap. And then, of course, we go on to the judicial branch, which contains yet another pull-out flap with important decisions of the United States Supreme Court. The book concludes with sections on the Bill of Rights and amending the Constitution, and includes yet another spitty thing, this time with numbers. So I highly recommend this book to parents and teachers who are looking for a way to make learning about the Constitution fun and memorable. It's also a fun book for adults. I'm almost 40 and I was like, oh, I want this, I love this. So whether you're a history buff or you're just a casual learner, it's a whole lot of fun. The book encourages our younger readers to engage in hands-on history with its tactile, interactive features, to build their vocabulary and to think critically about social studies concepts. Publishers Weekly called this book a fine example of information engineering, and I completely agree. So if you are looking for a fun way to boost your kiddos' American history knowledge or to keep your classroom engaged in their social studies lesson, look no further than the Interactive Constitution.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. That sounds fascinating. And I feel like there are people that we could share that with. Not naming any names, just putting it out there. All right, let's have Adrian share what he's been reading and enjoying.
I'm just fooling. Hello. So I will start with the newer book that I have read over the last couple weeks. I could have sworn that someone had talked about this book on Literary Libations before, but I could not find it. And so if anyone watching is not familiar with Shark Heart, it is the debut novel by Emily Habak. I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong. It is a fantasy. There's a love story in it, but realistically, the book is more about facing grief and loss, because the story revolves around a man named Lewis and his wife Wren, who have just gotten married, and they find out that Lewis is going to turn into a shark. He's going to turn into a great white shark. He will retain many of his memories, but he will start living in the ocean and eating fish. And so the book is unusual. It's the woman, for example, makes friends with a lady who's going to give birth to birds. And so it kind of paints, using some fantastical elements, it paints a really vivid picture of someone coping with the loss of a loved one. You could easily swap turning into a shark for suffering from cancer or other terminal illness. But it also delves into Ren's past, and I won't spoil, but she had some issues with her mother growing up that sort of lead into how she approaches her relationship with her soon-to-be shark husband, Lewis. I will definitely say, do give it a shot. It's a quick read. It's not like you can have it done in just a few hours, but it is an interesting and thought-provoking book about turning into sharks.
There you go. Yes.
For my second book, I kept up on the fantasy side of it because I recently finished A Wizard of Earthsea by the renowned science fiction author Ursula K. Le Guin. She wrote a lot of sci-fi and science fantasy books. This one came out in 1968, and it is the first of 6 books that all deal with the imaginary planet of Earthsea. And The Wizard of Earthsea is about the coming of age of a young man who starts off the novel with the name Dunny. And throughout the course of the book, he has his name changed and he becomes Ged. The book, he, in an effort to impress some people, he summons a shadow using magic, and then the book revolves around how he deals with this shadow that is out to take hold of him. The book's got magic, it's got dragons, they go on sailing adventures trying to figure out how to banish this shadow creature that's trying to take over him. It's a fun read. You can definitely see where it influenced a lot of later fantasy authors. Several famous authors, such as Neil Gaiman, have said that they directly got inspiration from Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books. If you're interested in movies, there's a Studio Ghibli adaptation that doesn't really do the book justice, but so you may want to just read it for yourself. But yeah, fun story, fantasy, dragons, all the good stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrian. I am kind of surprised I never read those as a kid because I feel like I read a lot of fantasy, but I did not read that series. I think my son has, but I have not. Thank you. And Mandy is going to share with us what she's been reading.
I think my first one is Beth Moore's newest autobiography. She is one of my most favorite Bible teachers, and I don't even know what it is about her. It's just, maybe it's her voice first that gets me. She talks about 90 miles a minute, and she's got this super Southern accent, which is very confusing because all of the Southern people that I love speak very slowly, but she speaks so quickly. And when I read her words, I can hear her voice. And that's always helpful for me, especially like her audiobooks. Although it's not the same, she does slow it down for an audiobook. It's not the same as hearing her speak. But anyway, she's been a favorite of mine for a long time, and she's been in the news in the last 4 or 5 years for various reasons. And so I was excited to get her book, and I actually didn't even finish it the first time I had it, so I had to wait for it to come back around, which just drives me bonkers, but I got it. And she is very transparent. She's got all the tea, but she does not spill it all. She tells her story very intensely, as she just is, very vulnerably, and very transparently. She's super honest with, the fact that her life has been a hot mess, like most of ours. She too touches on some of the mental illness that has touched their family. And for me, that was one of the most touching parts of the book. I mean, she leaves us from like her childhood in Arkadelphia, moving to the big city. She very briefly talks about some of the things that were done to her when she was small, and just her crazy family dynamics. And then goes through her church life and her life in service in the church, and all the way up through the present day. But the thing that touched me the most in the book is she was talking about her husband, and she was talking about the difficulties that her husband has had. And she tells the story about just screaming to God, why don't you love him? If you loved him, he wouldn't have to do all this. He wouldn't have to go through all this. And to come through it a couple of years later, and when she gets that moment, when she realized that, yes, God does love him, and she can see how he has loved her husband throughout their life together. Very touching, very emotional, and just a good read, especially if you know what her voice sounds like and you can mesh those two together. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. The next one is my Undersea. I forget the title of it. I'll just see my picture. In my mind, it's the Undersea, but aquatic. It's the aquatic amigurumi. So this is not your grandma's crochet. This is like some of the best amigurumi I've seen, and I've done a lot of them. I love to crochet. I love to crochet big things, but I really, really love to crochet teeny tiny little cute things. And that's what amigurumi is. These are fantastic patterns, and they are just so cute and so clever. There's everything from a fisherman to an anglefish to the anglerfish that has like the little thing that dangles over in front of his head. But they're super colorful and just really cute, and they all can be made with the most basic crochet stitches. Like really, they're not that hard. I know I say that and people are like, yeah, whatever, but it's true. It's true. There's a walrus. Oh my gosh, she's adorable. Just really cool, really bright, really bold. And one of the best things is they also have little QR codes scattered throughout the book. So not only are there like picture by picture instructions along with written instructions, but you can like zap the QR code and you can watch a little video too. And I mean, how can that not hurt, right? So if you love amigurumi, grab it. If you've just wanted to try it and you never have, this is like a perfect one. Even though they look complex, they are not. So grab it and give them a try.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. Crafty things always amaze me. All right. My couple of titles are coming up. The first one is a door stopper of a book. Abraham Verghese's The Covenant of Water. He also wrote Cutting for Stone, which is amazing. We read it for book club a number of years ago, and I've never forgotten it. And so this is his newest release. And when it came out, I was like, I have to read it. Doesn't matter what it's about. I'm going to pick it up and see what's going on. And so I started it. And again, this is probably a 600 to 700 page book. And I started it and I had to return it because there was a waiting list at the library. And so then I had to go out and use my Kindle points and go ahead and get it that way so I could finish it. And I got all the way through it and I kind of thought, did I like it? I don't know, because it isn't, I don't know how to describe books like these. It isn't a book that has a strong plot to it. It's very much about immersing yourself into these specific lives in this specific place. And this one takes place over about 70 years, from 1900 to 1977, in Kerala, India, which, here's me trying to do the Michigan thing, but with India, sorry, India. But it's at the southwestern portion of India. And it's really fascinating. I know next to nothing about Indian history. So that was interesting to me. And following the different generations, it starts with Bigamachi. She was Mariama. And in 1900, she actually has an arranged marriage because her father has passed away, and she is only 12. And she is put into this arranged marriage, and immediately all the senses are going off. This is terrible. This is going to be horrible. She makes the most of a very difficult situation and becomes the matriarch of this fascinating family with its great joys and its great tragedies. And then you follow the next 3 generations and what they do. And the Covenant of Water title refers to the fact that many of the boys in the family end up dying in or near water, because when they get near water, they become disoriented. And so Bigamachi discovers that this has happened to this family she's married into, and her faith leads her to start praying for a solution to this, a way to heal this so that the men in their family stop dying from this. So that's the little through line that carries through the book. And there's a lot of quotes about water and how water pulls people together. The monsoon season takes place, and you kind of live with the family through that. And there's no way I can do this story justice. But when I finished it and sat down to write my review on Goodreads, I realized how much these characters had stayed with me. From Bigamachi, and there's an elephant that comes to visit, and then her child Philippos, and then his wife Elsie, and what happens to them and their child. And suddenly I realized, I was like, okay, I kind of felt like I was part of this family for a while, which is the amazing thing about fiction. And Jessica mentioned this, and I've been doing tours with classes, and we always talk about what's fiction. And the typical answer that I have always heard is fiction is things that's not real. And I heard a new definition recently, that fiction is learning through imagination. And I thought that that was perfect, because you get the author's imagination and then you are bringing your own imagination to it. And I find that I learn amazing things through fiction by being in a place that I will probably never be. It's unlikely I'm ever going to travel to India. And certainly I'm not going to go back in time to see what it was like in the early 1900s. And this book does that. It immerses you, it transports you. And while it might not be a fast read, I definitely found it to be a worthwhile read. And I enjoyed the time that I spent with this family in India. So that is The Covenant of Water. If you really want a big read to just sink into for a while, I highly recommend that. My other title that I'm going to share is one that we did for our book club this month. And I have to say that when we chose it, it wasn't on the top of my list. I don't tend to be a nonfiction reader. This one happens to be about 9/11, and I was just sort of dreading it. I just felt like this isn't a book I want to read. This isn't a subject. Not that I don't think I need to know more about it, but it wasn't a subject that I think I was ready to read about. It wasn't something I would pick up in my normal day-to-day reading. And oh my goodness, I am so glad that we did this book with book club, because it is incredible. It is an oral history of 9/11. Garrett M. Graff went through hundreds of thousands of hours of recorded oral histories and then put them together chronologically so that you get the story from different points of view through the day before 9/11, through the entire day of 9/11, and then a follow-up afterwards. And it is the points of view from people whose perspective I had never even considered, from those who were going to work in the Twin Towers that day, to the first responders, to the TSA agents who put people onto the planes those days, to the air traffic controllers that were trying to figure out who was in control of which planes and how to get all the planes out of the sky as quickly as possible, to those who were on the flights, to those who were supposed to be on the flights, to the vice president and the president, and to our Secretary of State at the time, Donald Rumsfeld, who was at the Pentagon, to those who were working in the Pentagon, just a wide variety of perspectives. And yet it's put together so well that you never feel lost in the story. And if you have the opportunity and interest to do it on audiobook, it is fabulous. They use over 45 different actors to do all of the different voices. And whenever possible, they used archived footage for different moments during the time. So they have the archived footage of President George W. Bush's speech on the evening of 9/11. They have archived footage, and this was really hard to listen to, from flight attendants who were calling their airlines to let them know what was happening on the plane. So it is not in any way an easy book, but it's so important, and it makes you feel what it must have been like to be in any number of those situations that day. And I think that's something that a regular history book isn't as able to do as hearing it in the words of those who experienced it. Every single person at book club said that they couldn't put it down. It's really hard to describe because you don't want to say, oh, I really enjoyed this, because you didn't. There were definitely moments where you had to put it down or I had to stop listening. But it is a powerful book. And to me, I would want every high schooler to get this book in their hands to have a better understanding of what happened that day and why it is so important to our country. So that is The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett M. Graff. I can't give it enough thumbs up and enough stars. Highly recommend it to everyone. And those are my two reads, both very good. I want to thank all of you for coming and talking about what you've been reading and for bearing with me through some technical issues. And I want to thank those of you who have listened, and we will be back in October to share more titles that we've been enjoying. Thank you. Bye.